Imagine this. A group of thugs, full of arrogance and bravado, taking on a man in a wheelchair. They laugh, taunt, and think he's nothing more than an easy target. But they have no idea who they're messing with. What starts as a cruel game soon turns into something none of them could have predicted. You see, this man isn't just anyone. He's a retired bomb disposal veteran, a hero who's faced unimaginable danger. As the thugs push him too far, he decides to show them just what he's really made of. What happens next? Well, let's just say the tables are about to turn, and these thugs will learn a hard lesson in respect. But the real question is, will they survive it? This man, named Mike, wasn't always in a wheelchair. He'd been a bomb disposal expert in the military, a role that required nerves of steel and the sharpest focus. Years of service had taken a toll, both physically and mentally, but Mike carried the weight with quiet dignity. His hands, once steady under the pressure of diffusing explosives, now trembled slightly, a reminder of the near-death experiences he had survived. Yet despite his condition, Mike never lost his sense of purpose. The thugs had no clue. To them, he was just an easy mark. But as their laughter echoed through the alley, something shifted in Mike. He hadn't been in a real fight in years, but this wasn't about proving himself. It was about showing them the kind of respect a soldier deserves. And they had no idea what they were about to face. Mike's mind raced, calculating the risks as the thugs inched closer. They didn't know how wrong they were. Every move they made, every taunt they hurled, was pushing him into a corner he wasn't sure he could escape from. But Mike wasn't about to back down. Years of clearing minefields, navigating through dangerous zones, and defusing bombs had taught him one thing: never underestimate the situation. From the thugs' perspective, this was just a fun way to kill time. They had no idea who Mike was or what he was capable of. One of them, a bigger guy with a sneer on his face, shoved Mike's wheelchair. The others laughed, egging him on. But Mike's sharp gaze locked on the man's shoes, noting the slightest tremor in his stance. Mike wasn't just trained to see danger. He was trained to see fear, even in the smallest details. The big guy's grin faltered as Mike, without a word, reached into his bag and pulled out a small tool, a precision cutter. The thugs paused, unsure what to think. Was he carrying explosives? Was he armed? Mike's steady hands didn't shake as he held up the tool and gave it a quick twist, almost as if he were preparing to disarm something. The tension thickened, and for a moment, the alley felt like a different kind of battlefield. The thugs might have been used to throwing their weight around, but they had no idea that they were now playing with fire. The silence was deafening. The thugs had stopped laughing, their eyes shifting nervously from Mike's face to the small tool he held. They couldn't tell if it was a threat, but the way he handled it, so calmly, so deliberately, had them second-guessing everything. The big guy stepped back, his smirk replaced by hesitation. But Mike wasn't done. His eyes never left him as he slowly clipped the tool back into his bag, his movements sharp, controlled. He had their full attention now, but he wasn't about to give them the satisfaction of seeing fear. Instead, he remained still, studying them, waiting. One of the others, a younger thug with a nervous twitch, stepped forward, trying to act tough. "What's your problem, old man?" His voice cracked as he spoke, betraying his bravado. He wasn't used to people not being intimidated. "You think you're gonna scare us with that?" Mike didn't answer. He simply watched, his gaze unwavering. And then, with a sudden, swift motion, he spun his wheelchair, turning it sharply to face them head-on. The action was so fast, so unexpected, that it caught them all off guard. Mike's eyes locked onto the young thug who had spoken, and for the briefest of moments, the air felt like it was holding its breath. A flicker of realization passed over the thug's face, but it was too late. In one smooth motion, Mike reached into his bag again, this time pulling out a flashbang grenade, small, sleek, and deadly. He didn't pull the pin, but the thugs didn't know that. All they saw was the cold gleam of metal and the unmistakable shape of an explosive. The young thug's eyes went wide, and for the first time, real fear replaced the bravado on their faces. Mike could see it, their bodies frozen, the weight of the moment settling in. They were faced with a choice: risk making a move, or walk away with whatever pride they had left. But the alley had grown deathly quiet, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Each thug was now calculating their next move, and Mike knew that one wrong step could make all the difference. The stakes were higher than they ever imagined. Just as the young thug reached for his waistband, the sound of a motorcycle engine revving cut through the stillness, shattering the tension in the alley. The thugs flinched, distracted for just a second. That was all Mike needed. Before any of them could react, the rider on the motorcycle skidded to a halt at the entrance of the alley, sending gravel scattering in all directions. The rider, dressed in dark leather, removed their helmet, revealing a woman with sharp eyes and an intense glare. Her expression was familiar to Mike, too familiar. It was someone from his past, someone he never expected to see again. "Mike," she called out, her voice steady, almost calm. "You really going to scare them off with that old trick?" The thugs were frozen, unsure if they were witnessing a setup or a rescue. The woman took a step closer, her gaze flicking from Mike to the thugs and back. Mike's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just a coincidence. The woman, Sam, had been part of his team during his service in bomb disposal. They had shared some of the most dangerous moments of his life, moments that had nearly cost them both their lives. The same woman who had disappeared after their last mission, leaving Mike to pick up the pieces alone. The thugs, now utterly confused, exchanged uneasy glances. They were out of their depth, caught between a man in a wheelchair holding a grenade and a woman who seemed to have walked straight out of a memory Mike had tried to forget. Mike's fingers tightened around the grenade. This wasn't just about teaching these punks a lesson anymore. This was personal. And Sam had just walked back into his life at the worst possible moment. What did she want? Why now? "Are you really doing this, Mike?" she asked, her tone unreadable. "Because if you are, we have a lot more to deal with than these guys." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning, as the tension rose once more. The air was thick with tension as Mike and Sam locked eyes. The thugs stood motionless, the uncertainty in their expressions growing with each passing second. Mike's mind raced, trying to piece together why Sam had shown up now, at this moment. But before he could respond, Sam took a step forward, her gaze flicking over the thugs once more. Mike put the grenade down. She said softly, her voice calm but firm, "This isn't the way." Mike hesitated, his fingers loosening just slightly around the grenade. He'd been in enough situations where time was a luxury he couldn't afford, but something in Sam's voice, something in the way she stood there, unflinching, told him this wasn't just some coincidence. This was a warning. Before Mike could respond, the young thug who had been closest to him lunged forward, drawing a knife from his pocket. The others seemed to snap back into reality, rushing toward Mike with reckless abandon. In that split second, everything shifted. Mike's instincts kicked in, and he didn't think twice. He threw the flashbang. The explosion of light and sound sent the thugs stumbling backward, their eyes blinded and ears ringing. They were disoriented, scrambling for cover, but Mike wasn't done. He moved faster than they could react, using his wheelchair to pivot, his hands reaching for something hidden under the seat. In one smooth motion, he pulled out a stun gun and discharged it, hitting the biggest thug square in the chest. The man went down instantly, collapsing with a crash. The others hesitated, confused by this sudden turn of events. But Sam had already moved in. With swift precision, she disarmed the remaining thugs, using moves Mike recognized all too well, training from their time in the field. But just as it seemed like the chaos was winding down, Sam's hand froze in midair, and she looked at Mike with wide eyes. "Mike, get down." Before he could process the warning, a sharp shot rang out from behind him. Sam was already pushing him to the ground, but the bullet still grazed her arm. She winced, but there was no time to react. Mike, his mind racing, turned toward the direction of the shot. From the shadows of the alley, another figure emerged, a man in a dark suit, holding a silenced pistol. Mike recognized him immediately. This wasn't just some street thug. It was someone far more dangerous. A former ally, someone from the sane world Mike had tried to leave behind. "Sam," Mike muttered, his voice low and tight. "It's him. It's Stark." Sam's face went pale as she stood up slowly, blood dripping from her arm. "I should have known you'd be behind this." Stark smiled, a cold, calculating grin. "Did you really think I would let you two walk away? You owe me more than you can imagine. And now it's time to collect." The tension in the air was palpable. The thugs were still trying to recover, but Mike knew this was the real fight. Stark had always been dangerous, but now he had the leverage. Sam's blood was still fresh in the alley, and every second counted. Mike felt his grip tighten on the grenade once more, but just as he was about to act, Sam spoke again, her voice steady despite the blood dripping from her arm. "Mike, don't. We've got one shot at this. Trust me." And then in the blink of an eye, Sam did something unexpected. She pulled out a small device from her pocket, a tracking beacon, and tossed it on the ground. The device activated with a soft beep, sending a signal out. Stark's eyes narrowed. "You think this will stop me?" Before he could react, a loud siren blared in the distance, growing louder with every second. Stark's face shifted from confidence to realization. Sam had just called in backup, military backup. And the sirens weren't just a coincidence. They were part of the plan. As the sound of approaching vehicles filled the alley, Stark's grip on the pistol tightened. But it was too late. A specialized team of soldiers, Mike's old squad, rushed in, surrounding Stark and the remaining thugs in a perfect pincer movement. Mike and Sam shared one last look. She gave him a small, but knowing smile, her eyes full of the same quiet resolve that had kept them alive all those years. "Looks like we're both back in this together," she said softly, as the soldiers moved in to apprehend Stark. As Stark was taken into custody, the tension in the alley began to fade. But even though the fight was over, Mike knew one thing for sure. This wasn't the end. Stark was just the beginning of something much larger. And Sam had just pulled him back into a world he thought he'd left behind. But whatever came next, they would face it together. As Stark was hauled away, the alley grew eerily quiet, the danger now behind them. Mike and Sam shared a silent moment, the weight of everything that had just happened sinking in. The soldiers packed up, leaving Mike and Sam alone, their bond now stronger than ever. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about finding purpose again together. "Guess we're not done after all," Mike said, his voice hoarse but steady. Sam chuckled softly, despite the pain. "No, Mike, we're never really done." With that, they turned and wheeled out of the alley, leaving the chaos behind. For now, the streets were quiet again, but Mike knew this was just one chapter of a much bigger story. One thing was certain: no matter the obstacles, they would face it head-on, side by side. Their past had shaped them, but it wouldn't define them. The future was theirs to write.